Good morning. Today we'll be talking about tobacco and the impact, tobacco is having on the world, because the World No Tobacco Day is coming up on the 31st of May. Good morning, Dr. Andero, and Desmond Majekodunmi. It's always a pleasure to have you, our esteemed environmentalist, here on the program. There's just so much that we know about tobacco, and there's also so much more people don't know about tobacco. So I don't know if, Desmond, if you can talk to us, briefly about the theme for the World No Tobacco Day, and what's it about?
Well, basically, it's just about letting people know how damaging tobacco is, not just to human health, but to the environment. And, these days, there's a lot of awareness about, there's problems in the environment, because we're having all these heat waves and floods and heavy rains and all sorts of issues. And so they're looking closer at what causes these things. And the tobacco industry, particularly the cultivation, but even the burning of tobacco, which gives us far more particulates. For instance, it gives us almost 10 times more particulates than burning diesel. And I'm sure as doctors, you know how harmful particulates can be. Anyway, so the cultivation and use of tobacco is now recognized as a very damaging activity to the environment. And this is very worrying because, again, we have to remind ourselves, we call it environment, but it's actually our life support system, and we need to keep it healthy. So a lot of information has now come to light about the terrible damages, massive amounts of water, huge areas of land, tremendous amounts of energy. So basically, it's incontrovertible now that the tobacco industry is extremely harmful. It's a deadly industry. And that's where there's a huge challenge, because greed is driving us, against not curtailing it. So there's a big challenge for us to do that.
Thank you very much for that. So Dr. Andero, as an oncologist, you are actually almost, shall we say, at the forefront of the battle against tobacco, coming up, as it were, against, the worst aspects of it, the cancer and things that it causes. But let me not, what I'd like to ask you about, though, is just from a medical perspective, because Desmond has spoken to us about the environmental perspective. How does tobacco affect man, you and I, medically?
Thank you very much, Pamela. And Desmond has said it all about the danger of tobacco, not just to the environment, but to, human health. And, it is not an overstatement to say that tobacco is, posing a lot of health danger to the entire world population. And no wonder, certain countries over the years had to take or put up certain legislations and laws in order to put a check to, the rate at which, the dangers from tobacco is, the toll on human health. Specifically, as an oncologist, these are, the risk factors that we know have been connected to a series of oncological cases, ranging from cancers of the oral cavity to the esophagus, food tracts, cancer of the bladder. But most importantly, as we know, chief among all is the cancer of the lung. So tobacco, no doubt, is eating deep into the fabric of human health. And, a lot more has to be done to make sure, this risk is being checked, whichever way it can be done.
I mean, it's true. Tobacco, I mean, the interesting thing about tobacco is it's actually been around for centuries. And people have imbibed it in so many different ways. But the propagation of cigarettes is so big and it's so global. And its impact on the different systems is so huge. I mean, you've spoken about the cancers briefly now, and I know we're going to go into it in more detail. Can you tell us about lung cancer, how lung cancer develops from the nicotine and so on?
With regard to the direct relationship between cigarette smoking and malignant conditions, notably lung cancer, we do know that cigarette smoking is the major risk factor when we talk about lung cancer. By the way, we are talking about when the lung, which is the spongy tissue in the chest, that takes in air and let out, other gases. We are saying that when this delicate organ is being exposed chronically to cigarette smoking. Now, when we talk about exposure to cigarette smoking, we're talking about the harmful materials therein, even much more than nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive substance, which of course could be derived from other substances. But from studies and research, we know that cigarette smoking, the smoke contains hundreds and thousands of harmful substances, and when the lung is being exposed to these substances over time, it can cause certain transformations, within the lung substance. And these transformations can lead to irreversible changes over time. And that is why we do know that there is a direct connection between how many cigarettes an individual smokes per day and for how many years. The more the smoking, the number of cigarette smoking, and over time, as the years go by, such individuals are at a very high risk of lung cancer. And talking about cancer in itself, we are talking about a condition in which, due to certain factors, smoking inclusive, normal cell, as programmed naturally, they lose that innate ability to control their growth, proliferation, and divisions. And over time, it leads to uncontrolled cell division and to a mass or tumor, as it were. And of course, that is not just a concern. What is unique about cancer generally of anywhere, lung cancer inclusive, is the tendency to spread from that local area, affecting the surrounding tissues and of course the distant organs, destabilizing their, anatomy and their functions. And over time, this could become life-threatening. And this makes cancer generally, including lung cancer, a global burden. Now, coming back home to lung cancer, yes, we can just talk briefly about how do people present with lung cancer. And how do we know if, there are certain telltale signs of lung cancer? I'll be quick to mention that cigarette smoking is not a known, cause or risk factor for lung cancer, but that is going to be for a later discussion. Now, talking about the presentation of lung cancer, for individuals with chronic cough, we're talking about cough that just wouldn't go after the use of regular cough medications. And of course, this also could come alongside with what we call hemoptysis, individual coughs. And the cough is productive of sputum stained with blood. In this case, and of course with history of smoking or even without smoking, so this calls for an attention. It may also come alongside with, not being able to breathe well. And at the very early stage of lung cancer, it is asymptomatic. but we're talking about over time as the disease advances. So some of these manifestations may come up. In addition to the cough and the blood and the sputum, chest pain could be there, breathlessness, hoarseness of voice as it encroaches, and of course, infiltrating to the upper airway. It may also include something like chest pain, back pain, bone pain, advanced cases, metastatic cases now spreading to the bones or even to the brain, whereby a patient now presents with headache, seizures, and similar notable symptoms. So, individual with a history of smoking, and by the way, it is also good to mention here, somewhere along the line, that we talk about smokers, but of course, we also have secondhand smokers. They are equally at risk.
Who are they? What are they? What does that mean?
Great. Pamela, we're talking about individuals who are exposed to, they are not smokers themselves, but they are exposed to the smokes coming from the cigarettes. And this can be found especially in public places where, people smoke, and then a passerby or passersby could, inadvertently, continuously, get exposed to these smokes from these cigarettes, and they are almost as, at risk as even the smokers. But even more importantly, if you have an inmate or a roommate or a partner who smokes, and you live together, you are equally at the same risk as someone.
That's particularly so for example, your spouse. If your spouse smokes in the house, so you're at risk. And also, what about the children? Are they at more risk?
Yeah, exactly, Pamela. Studies have shown that lung cancer in much younger, generation can be, traced to exposure to smokes, from smokers. Either they cohabit a place or maybe continuous exposure to smoke wherever they live, So secondhand smokers are at risk. And that is why little wonder in some countries, smoking in public places are banned.
Thank you. That has been a very interesting session. But I think one of the key issues, when we've talked about the symptoms, we've talked about so many different cancers caused by tobacco, and you've talked about the effect on the human body, and the many toxins contained in cigarettes and all that. How can we prevent it, all of this? Dr. Andero.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Well, there is no very sure way of preventing lung cancer. However, certain measures can be put in place to reduce the risk of lung cancer. Notably, for individuals who are at the point of venturing or having the adventure of going into smoking, I advise not to even start at all. Because not starting is even the solution, because of the addictive effect of the nicotine in tobacco. So that is why it makes it so very difficult for some to quit. So do not start. And for those who are already into cigarette smoking, we try as much as possible to encourage them to quit smoking. And quitting is not as easy as the way I say it. It is very, it's a long road. And some, there are some support groups that they can join that can also help them therein. And then there are some other methods to at least reduce chances, like healthy living. We encourage healthy diets, regular body exercise, fruits and vegetables. All these are key and are very, very helpful. And we do know people that work at certain places and are exposed to certain substances are at much higher risk of having lung cancer, like people that work in asbestos companies, other companies where there are certain hazardous chemicals. So in order to limit or reduce that, the risk of having lung cancer, we did say earlier on, of course, smoking and all these factors are not the known risk factors. However, all these methods are put in place, they can reduce your risk of, lung cancer.
Focusing on the World No Tobacco Day and the fact that we are finding out more about how dangerous the tobacco is, not just to the human body, as Dr. Andero has described so well, but it's something that we really never thought about, the actual impact that the tobacco industry has on the earth. Desmond, how can we prevent this?
That's a very, very good question. And we have to prevent it because it's totally unconscionable. And we need to appeal to our conscience because the harsh reality, whether we like it or not, the most deadly drug known to humanity, that is the drug substance that kills more people than any other, is tobacco, is smoking, is tobacco, not just through the smoking though, but also through the cultivation. It is deadlier than any other drug. It's the most dangerous drug, man. And way back when the scientists and the good doctors like your good selves, discovered that, hey, it is inimical to our health, they tried to stop it, but they couldn't because the massive amounts of profits being made. And so it's about a consciousness, because not only are we affecting human species, we're affecting all other species, and it is an intricate, beautiful web of life. And we have no right to dismantle this web. We are here, caretakers of creation, here to replenish the earth and not destroy it. So we need to get that in our consciousness and do the right thing.
No, that's very deep. That's very deep. Because it's this, and stand and say what the tobacco industry says, and they say, but we create jobs. Without our jobs, people wouldn't eat. Without our jobs, what would people do? So what's your response to that?
Well, the armed robber creates jobs too, and they're able to get a lot of money for themselves. No, it's unconscionable. There's all sorts of other ways to create jobs, even in the agricultural industry. There's far more benign things that we could be growing, aloe vera and so many other things that I'm sure your good selves will be able to advise us about. And as our friend, the doctor, even said, to prevent diseases, you could eat some very, good items, types of fruits and nuts and so on. So the jobs can be created in that way. There's no justification, there's no excuse. It's just that it's the greed motivation. And now nature is actually telling humanity, okay, you've gone too far down this road and you cannot put profit ahead of people and the planet, because we're talking of our children's future as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's really important. Dr. Andero, some people say, oh, I don't smoke cigarettes. I only smoke cigars. It's not so bad. What do you have to say to that?
Yeah. Well, talking about tobacco, there are different routes through which people get those substances into their system. It could come in the form of smoking. It could come in the form of sniffing. It could come in the form of, nowadays some younger generation, they try to, make it look kind of psychedelic. So there's something called vaping, So, and this is just a way of vaporizing the nicotine, gets into their system to make them high, There are some other ways to which people get this thing, and cigar, like you said. What we know is that either way, or whichever form of getting the tobacco into their system, it is still hazardous. Although the chief among those that I mentioned, smoking generally tends to be the one that exposes the lung substance into a much higher hazardous effect of smoking, but cigar too does the same thing. Now, what we know about cigar is that, you know, people talk about the difference with the filters, but then whichever way, either the regular smoking or the cigar or every other form of, you know, of getting the tobacco into their system, that you want to chew it, you know, these substances still somehow find their ways into the system. So I'm not going to stand here and say to anyone that cigars are better than smoking. Ultimately, it boils down to the same, you know, a risk factor of patients standing the risk of one cancer or the other. And like I said, smoking in itself with, say, drinking or exposure to some other hazardous substances, there is a synergy. So, so be it smoking or cigar or whichever way, it could just be the trigger. That little thing that you need, I'll just trigger a transformation in one part of the body or the other, which could be lungs, like we said, could be in the bladder, you know. Even cervical cancer, I mean, it has been traced, you know, as one of the risk factors in cervical cancer, apart from, you know, the known factors, you know. So smoking is one single factor, risk factor, that has been implicated in so many malignant conditions. And using of cigar does not make it anything less.
Thank you. I will say. Thank you very much. Now, we unfortunately, I mean, this program has just rushed by. Do you have any last words? Because it's already over. Do you have any last words for our listeners? Desmond first.
Yes. Love yourself, love your neighbor, and resist tobacco in every way possible. Oh, it's deadly. Give it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Andero, any last words?
My last word, prevention is the key. Meaning, if you have not started smoking, don't even try, don't even imagine it. And for those of you who must have started smoking, you quit it. And then everything you have to do to reduce your risk of having lung cancer, you know, you have to do it. So prevention is the key.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for new video updates.